Welcome to this presentation of Landscaping for Birds. I'm Paulette Epple with the Sacajawea Audubon Society, and I'm here to talk about ways that we can make a positive difference in our home landscapes by creating habitat for wildlife in our own backyards. We all know that bird populations are struggling as a result of natural habitat loss throughout the country, and indeed around the world. Bozeman and Gallatin County environments are certainly no exception. Bozeman's population has doubled in just 30 years, and Gallatin County is recognized as the fastest growing county in Montana. With every new house built, every new commercial area developed, and every parking lot paved over, we lose natural habitat. And the story is repeated all across the nation. So, what's a bird to do? If their populations are to recover, or at least stabilize, they're going to need our help. We certainly need spaces for our homes, our businesses, and yes, even parking lots. But let's consider where we can individually make a difference and help restore some of our lost natural habitat. Of course, I'm talking about our own landscapes, and in particular, our lawns. Incredibly, lawns are now the largest irrigated crop in the United States. And if you put all of our nation's lawns together, they would cover an area the size of Texas. But there's not a single species of bird that can live its life cycle in a mowed lawn. In fact, biologically, lawns are basically impoverished ecosystems. To replace some of that lost natural habitat, we're going to need to turn to our landscaped yards. Oh, but not like this. This attractive landscape has been professionally designed with a variety of colors, forms, and textures. But in reality, it's lifeless. A landscape like this, featuring exotic plants pruned into unnatural submission, plus lots of heavily fertilized and irrigated lawn, offers no habitat for birds or other species of wildlife either. It is possible to go all out and create a rich oasis of habitat for birds, pollinators, and other wildlife to enjoy right in your own front, back, or side yard. Now, you may not be able to commit your whole yard to natural habitat like this, but even doing so in just a corner garden or a backyard biohedge, that can add a lot to the overall fabric of habitat throughout our communities. As you think about and design a more bird-friendly landscape for your yard, remember that birds need 4 basic features to live and thrive. First of all is food. Depending on the species, birds need berries, fruit, nectar, or seeds to eat, but most importantly, they need insects. Surprisingly, nearly all songbirds, even those which eventually become seed and fruit eaters, they raise their young almost entirely on a diet of insects. So, let's avoid using pesticides when we can, which damage insect populations, and instead welcome some insects to our yard. The second basic feature birds need in a landscape is cover. Birds need places to hide from predators and seek shelter from bad weather. More natural landscapes, as we will discuss throughout this talk, provide that sort of cover that furnish shelter and security for birds. Third, don't forget water. Unless you're lucky enough to have a creek or pond in your yard, you can provide water easily with a bird bath. There are even heated bird baths available for use during the winter. The fourth and final landscape feature needed to support healthy bird populations is nesting sites. In short, birds need mature trees and shrubs to nest in. You can supplement this by providing nest boxes for a few birds like chickadees, wrens, and tree swallows. To create bird-friendly landscapes, it's really important to create habitat layers. Having a few specimen trees in a mowed lawn really doesn't offer much in the way of habitat. The greatest value comes in having clusters of plants consisting of trees, shrubs, and ground covers planted together. We're trying to replicate the woodland effect. Consider planting tall shade trees, maybe birch, aspen, or pines, and also shorter understory trees like flowering crab apples and Rocky Mountain maple. Go ahead, add a shrub layer under or near the trees to provide cover and berries for the birds, and incorporate flowers and ground covers to attract pollinators and offer some nectar for hummingbirds. The adage to keep in mind is missing plant layers equals missing wildlife species. Here are some good examples of habitat layering. On the left, you see an overstory of aspen and evergreens with cotoneaster, red-twig dogwoods, and a variety of ground covers beneath. On the right, the grassy lawn is reduced, and instead the yard's filled with a large perennial garden with tall trees, shrubs, and vines surrounding it. It's important to remember that native plants are an important key to the success of creating habitat for birds. Luckily, native species of plants are easy to grow since they're hardy to our climate, they're relatively drought tolerant, and they require less maintenance. But most importantly, birds and the insects that they need for food have co-evolved with native plants. Birds' search engines, if we can use that term, are pre-programmed to seek out native plants, and it's the same for insect. Bottom line, it is native plants that birds and insects are most drawn to. Many plants offered for sale at nurseries are exotic ornamentals from other countries, with leaves that are actually unpalatable to local insects. By contrast, here you see native plant examples such as quaking aspens layered over dogwoods and Great Basin wild ryegrass, bright red mountain ash berries, and a wildflower garden of purple wild bergamot and fleabane, and the bright red and yellow blanket flower, all providing rich habitat for insects and birds alike. Another thought to keep in mind is that, in general, birds need plant density. Large, densely planted groupings are far more desirable than individual scattered plants. Birds like clusters of plants, with branches touching and intertwining, offering them security. Here, a small corner of a yard has been turned into an aspen grove, with lilacs, red-twig dogwoods, and shade-tolerant perennials beneath. Birds such as this black-headed grosbeak and yellow warbler, they need this degree of dense cover. Have you noticed how narrow side yards have become on city lots? Some of them are no more than 5 feet. They really aren't wide enough for a play space for kids or an outdoor seating area, so let's put them to good use for the birds. This homeowner put in a densely planted bed, only 5 to 7 feet wide, and created a wonderful habitat corridor for the birds. This works well on a back lot line also, and provides effective screening from neighboring properties. In this bed, Canada red cherry, aspen, spruce, and a variety of shrubs were used very effectively in a narrow planting area. Here we see how a 5-foot wide bed along the driveway was turned into a handsome and bird-friendly privacy screen. The red-twig dogwoods offer seasonal color and berries that are favorites of birds. Along the driveway edge, there's catmint planted that attracts butterflies and other pollinators with bright blue flowers, and there are grasses that provide seeds. Who needs a mowed lawn? Instead, our homes could be surrounded by low-maintenance wildflower meadows. This yard's been planted with native grasses, prairie coneflower, and blanket flowers. This creates a haven for butterflies and pollinators. Birds will get attracted to the insects and will also feed on the wildflower seeds. I do need to point out that a yard like this does need some maintenance. Invasive weeds need to be removed, and once a year in the late fall or early spring, the old dry vegetation needs to be mowed and raked off to make way for the next season's growth. Here's another alternative to a grassy lawn. This beautiful front yard is planted entirely with native plants, most of them very drought tolerant. Even though the bed along the sidewalk gets hot sun all day long, the use of thick mulch and the right choice of plants means that it needs very little supplemental water. Now, let's take a look at some of what I like to call all-star plants for attracting wildlife. If I could add only one shrub to my garden to attract birds, it would have to be the serviceberry. Its blooms are absolutely stunning in the spring, and when the berries come ripe in midsummer, all kinds of birds come in to feed. Tanagers, grosbeaks, waxwings, catbirds, robins, flickers, finches, the list just goes on and on. The native Saskatoon serviceberry can grow up to 20 feet tall. Might be too tall for your yard. So for a smaller space, look for the Regent cultivar at our local nurseries, since they stay a much more compact, 5 to 6 feet tall. Red Ocean Dogwood is another favorite. The attractive red stems add color all winter long, and the white berries are relished by a wide variety of birds. Cotoneaster is a wonderful hedge plant, and it's loved by birds. The berries in the fall are a major attractant, but surprisingly, birds also enjoy eating the flowers of these plants too. Western tanagers and cedar waxwings will seek out the flowers in midsummer, and if you were to taste a flower, you would know why. Each flower has a tiny drop of sugar nectar inside. Quite sweet. For a shade tree, you can't go wrong with the handsome paper birch. Birch trees are known to support a wide variety of insects, including caterpillars and butterflies. Chickadees, warblers, and kinglets will glean the insects from the trees. The catkins are the flowering reproductive part of the tree. They're filled with tiny seeds that goldfinches, siskins, and redpolls love to eat. Mountain ash are recognized for the showy white flowers in the spring and their bright orange-red berries in the fall. If you're lucky, you might get to see a large flock of waxwings descend upon a mountain ash tree in winter and nearly strip it of its berries. Who doesn't hope to entice hummingbirds into their garden? Some plant species will help you to do so, and that includes wild bergamot, otherwise known as bee balm, a real hummingbird favorite. These native plants with light purple flowers grow wild in the Montana foothills. They're very drought tolerant. Cultivars are also available in bright red, pink, and coral colors. Hummingbirds love the cultivars just as well as the native wild bergamot, but be aware that the cultivars lack that drought tolerance of the natives, and they'll need more supplemental water. Dropmore honeysuckle, it's an attractive vine with its orange trumpet-shaped flowers, and it's an absolute hummingbird magnet. Golden currant is a native to Montana and is the first shrub to bloom locally in May. The same month that hummingbirds are coming back to Montana and needing to find food, it's a perfect match. Now for gardeners with very little space to work with, sunflower is a great choice. We can almost always find a corner of a garden to add a few sunflower plants. The common garden variety is easy to grow each year from seed, and birds like this nuthatch, as well as chickadees, finches, and sparrows, love landing on the heads and devouring the seeds. Let's not forget the evergreens. As we've discussed, birds need cover and nesting sites, and that's what conifers like pines, spruce, and junipers furnish. Just imagine yourself as a small songbird out in the middle of a winter snowstorm. Where are you going to find protection? You would want to take refuge deep in the protective branches of these trees for shelter. Plus, the trees generate a wealth of food for birds in the form of seeds and cones and bright blue juniper berries. They also host a wide array of moth and butterfly larvae on their needles, thus providing insects for the birds. We can always supplement our garden habitat by adding bird feeders, nest boxes, and a water source to further entice our feathered friends to our yards. This gives us the added pleasure of being able to see the birds coming in for our offerings. And note, not all bird baths have to be on a pedestal, as this photo of a covey of gray partridge shows. So, let's remember the keys for creating successful habitat. Plant a variety of plants, and plant them densely in clusters and groupings. Create habitat layers, including canopy trees of various heights, an understory of shrubs, and a ground layer, including perennial flowers or ground covers. And be sure your yard includes a healthy dose of native plants to continue the biodiversity of insects that birds rely on. Even if we only have a small space to work with, such as a patio of a condo or a townhouse, we can still add pots of bird-friendly plants and create a miniature habitat there. Every little bit helps in the effort to create more bird-friendly landscapes in our urban and our suburban environments. So in conclusion, we all embrace the values of wilderness and we want to support our wildlife. That's at least part of the reason we're all here today, celebrating Earth Day together. What I've tried to do with this presentation is share ideas of how we can all make a difference by restoring nature to our yards, our city landscapes, and our neighborhood parks. Together, we can create havens for wildlife with healthy, viable habitat right in our own communities. If you'd like to learn more about how to create habitat in your own yard that's more friendly to birds, pollinators, and wildlife, visit our website at sacajaweaaudubon.org. And thank you for your attention, and good luck inviting wildlife to your yard.